Hi.
Hi.
Can you share a bit about your upbringing and how it shaped the person you are today?
Absolutely. I guess I'll just start with my name's Asima Azam. I am a candidate for county judge in Group 5 in Orange County. I'll start a little bit about where I was born. I was born in Elkhart, Indiana. My parents are from Pakistan. They immigrated here in the 70s. My dad's a chemical engineer. My mom had a master's in English literature, so very educated, but still immigrated and sort of faced the challenges I think that all immigrants face when they come to the United States. Probably one of the milestone things that happened in my life that shaped it is in the 90s. My dad was laid off multiple times. He had to abandon his career as an engineer, and he got into business and purchased a Dunkin' Donuts. I watched my parents go from having professional careers to having to work the night shift in a franchise, mopping the floor at midnight, making donuts, all that kind of stuff. I went to 3 different high schools in 4 years. A lot of changes in life, but really, I think what I came away with is sort of watching, my parents go through that life change and hardship and come out successful.
Wow. Who have who have been the most influential people in your life and how have they impacted your journey?
So I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been asked this question a lot. I know we hear this proverb all the time, behind every great man is a great woman. And I feel lucky to say that I feel like I have the flip side of that. I've had a lot of great men in my life be sponsors of me and my professional career kind of throughout it, starting with my dad. Education has always been paramount in his house, particularly for his daughters. Getting educated was the number one priority before everything else. The second would be my husband. One of kind of the things about my life that has really shaped my life is I got married very young. I got married when I was 20. So I've been married for 26 years, which is a very long time for somebody my age. But my husband has been an amazing partner. He's always taken an immense amount of pride in everything that I do. I've done a lot of things, that put strain on our family throughout the last 25 years to try and advance my professional career. And every time I come to him with an idea, such as running for an office, he's always like, let's aim a little higher. Why are you running for this? Let's run for president. I'm just kidding. But, he's been wonderful. And then the last two people really are my law partners. I started my career at Devine and Estes in Orlando, Florida, as a small real estate law firm. My partners, Russ Devine and Ted Estes, hired me straight out of law school, and I stayed there for 21 years. They were incredible partners and mentors. Ted Estes taught me how to practice law, legal writing, understanding, developing arguments and legal theories. And Russ Devine, who has passed away since then, really taught me how to practice with professionalism. And that means you can disagree with somebody without being disagreeable. And I think that's a skill that a lot of attorneys need to learn early on, but don't because they don't have fantastic mentors like I did.
It's amazing. What personal values or life experiences do you feel have most influenced your perspective and decision making?
So, I mean, probably first and foremost would be what I shared earlier, is sort of watching my parents go through a really significant transition from professional life to becoming business owners and really starting from the ground up. It is a cliche immigrant story, but we all carry it. I mean, a lot of us have seen our parents firsthand sort of abandon everything they were used to and everything, that they grew up with and work hard, to make it out of a difficult situation. The second would be being a mom. I have 2 children. My daughter's going to be 20. My son is 16. And really, I feel like what that has taught me is, people, especially children and young adults, can make decisions based on context that are sometimes not the best decisions, but that does not mean they are bad people. They're influenced by things and, they deserve to be guided and given second chances.
So, why this seat and why now? What made you feel like stepping into the bench was the right next move?
So I've been practicing law for 23 years. I was at Divine and Estes for 21 years. Through part of that, I became a mediator in 2018, which is, obviously a position where listen to both sides of the story and render an impartial decision. I also have been a special magistrate with the Orange County Tax Collector for 5 years, and that is also a position where you listens to two sides, take evidence, give appropriate weight to the evidence, and make a neutral decision that you feel like is, supported by the law and is in the best interest of the parties. I feel like in a lot of those positions, my feedback from the people, that come before me is that regardless of my personal affiliation or relationship with any of the parties, I mean, I've been in town for a long time, so I know a lot of the parties that come before me. I'm still able to render a very fair, neutral decision.
When people hear judge, they think of authority. What does fairness actually look like to you in a real courtroom setting?
So to lawyers, this would sound like a very basic idea, but I think to non-lawyers, sort of the crux of fairness is notice and an opportunity to be heard. So in every situation, whether it's civil or criminal, the person that's coming before you, for a violation of a law, a fine, a collection matter, you need to make sure that they understand the law and the wrongdoing that they're being accused of, and that they have an opportunity to give their side of the story. And, in my practice, I'm a civil lawyer. A lot of times, I mean, I do a lot of collection work, I do a lot of landlord tenant work. And there's many, many, many people who will not have gotten the notices, letting them know that they owe a certain amount of money, that it was due, and what the consequences would be if they, didn't pay it or violated a certain law. So you can't hold somebody accountable if you're not certain that they have notice, and then you give them an opportunity to present their side of the story.
Makes a lot of sense. As the child of immigrant parents, how do you plan on using this experience to serve your community as an Orange County judge?
So one of the things that I saw obviously with my parents when they were business owners, but I see with a lot of people's family, parents, and in my practice, is, you have people who are very intelligent people who have the ability to understand things and consequences, but English is not their first language. And sometimes the system will treat them as if they're not intelligent simply because they don't understand the language. So I have a lot of situations where I will have an individual who I'm up against who will have their child come with them to a mediation and have them translate for them. We'll have a granddaughter come with them and translate for them. And so, obviously because of my life experience, I understand if English is not your first language, or if, you are not at the level of education where you might be able to understand something very complex. So one of the things that I think is a hallmark of my legal practice and the way I practice law is I'm very accessible. I've spent 23 years working with non-lawyers in situations. And so I am able to, and I always break down complex sort of concepts into very simple terms that somebody can understand and respond to.
Yeah, that's a skill. It's very hard to break
Yeah.
down the technical, especially when you know it so well.
And I think a lot of lawyers work frequently with parties that are represented by counsel, but I do a lot of work with parties that are not represented by counsel, where I'm the counsel for my party, but the person on the other side doesn't have counsel. And so I have to do a lot of work on sort of explaining things.
So let's dive more into your time in the courtroom. What kind of cases or experience shaped how you think about justice today?
So, I mean, I've done at the top of sort of complex business litigation. I've done a lot of work with like non-competes and enforcement of that. I've done a lot of condominium termination work, but kind of my day-to-day in county court, I do a lot of collections work on behalf of condos and HOAs. I do a lot of landlord tenant work, and that's where people come in, who are not represented and might not understand the law. And so, a lot of times when I go to hearings, if somebody comes in and they're not represented, I will understand from them what their side of the story is, and then I will explain it to the judge. And I think judges appreciate that. They want attorneys that are being responsible, and that responsibility is, rather than taking advantage of somebody who can't properly explain themselves, understand them and then help them explain it to the court.
Courtrooms can be intimidating for people who've never been in one. How do you make sure people feel heard and not overwhelmed?
So, I mean, it's kind of what I've been talking about
Yeah.
the whole time about accessibility. You need to be somebody who's not scary, who somebody feels comfortable talking with. And like I said previously, I have a lot of people who owe money to a client of mine, and they will call me, to get help for themselves. And, I can't represent them, but I can break things down into simple terms and explain to them what's happening, what the consequence will be if they don't comply, how much time they have, if they have a valid good faith reason, how we can explain that to my client and the court to buy them more time or things of that nature.
Finally, judges have to be neutral, but they're still human. How do you balance compassion with sticking strictly to the law?
So again, it's sort of what I had said before, like the basic of law, any kind of legal enforcement by any body, really, a quasi judicial body or a judge, is notice and an opportunity to be heard. Like you can't impose a consequence or a penalty against somebody unless you know in advance that they knew what the rules were and then they violated them. And if they violated them, was there any valid good faith reason for violating it? It kind of, in my practice, I mean, a lot of times with the collection work and the landlord tenant work, people will come to me with, hey, I'm behind because I'm taking care of my mom. Hey, I'm behind because I lost my job. Or I'm behind. I want you to know I'm not a bad person. I honor my obligations, but if I could have more time, if I could have an additional opportunity to comply, I will. You just have to trust me. And I think that's sort of how I would handle a courtroom. I mean, I'm generally one of those people that comes at the world with people are generally good. They don't intend to violate laws. They don't intend to not pay things. You sort of need to hear their side of the story. But ultimately, I also, have to be firm in saying, hey, you entered into this contract, you agreed to this obligation. You're going to have to uphold it. We can try and get additional time. We can make some exceptions for mistakes made prior, but ultimately, the goal is to enforce the law. That's what judges are obligated to do. And so I've been doing that in my career, kind of all throughout. And I think that's the kind of judge that I would be: compassionate, but somebody who does apply the law.
Yeah. So to kind of wrap it all up, why should people vote for you to be judge?
My campaign has kind of had three sort of cornerstones, and I think I've touched on all of them. The first one is experience. I have 23 years of experience. Specifically, I am a civil law lawyer. I think in the past 10, 15 years, we've had a lot of appointments and candidates who practice criminal law, but yet 80% of the cases filed in county court are civil law. And so you definitely need somebody with that experience on the bench. And I practice law. I'm a mediator. I've also been a special magistrate. So I bring a lot of experience to the bench. The second thing is, in terms of compassion, I'm a mom. I have two children, and that has given me a perspective, I think, in how I view the world and how, context and how people are raised really shapes a lot of how they travel through the world. So, like I said, I understand people make mistakes, and that shouldn't color their whole life. So I bring that kind of empathy, I think, to the table. And then the last thing I've been talking about is, being somebody who grew up with parents who were not born here and faced those challenges. A lot of people come to county court who are not represented, and they're facing challenges, whether they be language barriers, whether they be ones of education, not being able to understand. They need a judge who's willing to bring things down to an accessible level, explain it to them, and make sure they have an opportunity to bring their side of the story.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.